What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So something that we haven't really done in a pretty long time actually, but that I wanted to bring back is talking about the hidden or indirect buffs inside the new patches that Riot put out when they balanced the gameplay of League of Legends. So, although a lot of the balancing is really obvious, like just making a flat out particular ability deal more damage, sometimes those tweaks to the stats of a champion or item end up in causing a lot of indirect buffs or nerfs that are going to take place to the rest of the game. And today we're going to be taking a look at some of those indirect changes so that you guys can stay ahead of the meta and know exactly what to expect going into patch 6.24. And just before we start, I want to give a huge shout out to ProGuides.com for helping me out with the editing on this video. They're actually releasing a new app that's going to be free to use and it's going to be very helpful. So definitely check out their new app, as well as you can check out their site with a free trial with the link in the description. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and let's begin. So before we make our predictions for the new OP champions and the biggest losers of the patch as well, let's talk about the indirect buffs that are going to be taking place. So first off, we've got the Haunting Guise and Liandry's buff. So making them cheaper is going to be a huge boon to champions who love that health and magic penetration, mostly the AP Bruiser champions. So AP Bruisers do like to get as much ability power as possible, but they also need to get tanky enough to be able to survive in the middle of a fight. And that dependence on resistances or the health stat means that they love magic penetration even more, since it allows them to deal more damage without needing to buy those expensive AP items. Haunting Guise is already a really gold efficient item, so this upgrade is going to make champions like Rumble, like Swain, potentially even guys like Vladimir who build these items a lot more powerful, while also making life a little bit easier for those damage over time champions that use AP, like maybe Cassiopeia and Teemo, that want to build that Liandry's, since they can get access to the Liandry's Torment passive a little bit earlier into the game. Next in line for the champions that are going to be getting an indirect buff is actually one that is pretty interesting to me. It's Burst Mages. Essentially all of the mages in the game that don't really ever build Rylai's, instead opting for the new other raw AP items to raise that major insta-kill, that burst potential. The Rylai's nerf taking place on this patch is pretty big, and it's going to make it a lot less of a staple, which means that the enemy mages that you're facing in lane as a burst mage are going to be squishier in general, which makes life way easier for you for the burst mages who are unaffected by the nerfs to Rylai's Crystal Scepter. It's going to be a little bit cheaper to build Rylai's now, but the item is going to be a lot weaker. So utility mages aren't completely helpless, but even for the guys that are still building Rylai's, well, it's just going to be less powerful in general. So it's a pretty nice trade-off that burst mages should be pretty happy about. The champions that really like to kill people nice and quick, the guys like Veigar, Annie, Syndra, those champions that can one-shot people, this patch is going to be pretty awesome for you and should mean some good things for the laning phase. Now the next hidden buff that's taking place is one that's actually pretty fun. So the release of CAMILLE, a new duelist with a focus on gap closing in order to start putting out damage, means that there's going to be a lot of champions that actually start to shine as potential counter picks to her. CAMILLE's definitely a duelist, and she's made to have good teamfight potential as well, which means that the true duelist champions like Fiora and Jax are going to have a big step up in the 1v1 scenario, making them great picks when facing CAMILLE in lane, but at the same time, any champions with pushback effects that can negate her ultimate and deny her ability to really lock down on a target. A lot of the notable examples, stuff like Tristana, Janna, potentially Alistar as well, since they can just shove her away outside of her ultimate, cancel her ultimate really, and make her pretty much useless. So that is going to be pretty awesome. As well, of course, you also have Poppy is going to be a really big counter. CAMILLE definitely wants to get into melee range by using hookshot towards terrain and then jumping onto the target. But that's exactly where Poppy wants her actually, right up against a wall. So because of CAMILLE's hookshot, Poppy's actually going to be an amazing counter against her. And CAMILLE, well, I gotta say I played her on the PB and she was pretty darn powerful, so it looks like she might be taking the meta by storm on this patch. And so as CAMILLE gains some relevance in the meta, the champions that have some really awesome counter mechanics against her, which is really not that many champions to be honest, are gonna have a great time in the meta playing against CAMILLE. Now the next one we're taking a look at is pretty darn obvious, I gotta say, but the Fervor of Battle Mastery Keystone buff is a definite win for AD carry champions, as well as the auto attack bruisers. The stacks of Fervor now are gonna last up to 6 seconds from the previous 4, and you're gonna gain up to 8 attack damage per stack rather than the previous 6, and the max number of stacks has been decreased down to 8 from 10, but that's still up to 4 extra total AD that is way easier to keep stacked and also faster to stack up. so you can just keep fighting with that bonus for a lot longer. Other champions that aren't AD carries do occasionally use Fervor of Battle, but in general it is kind of like the Marksman Mastery, so they're going to be the ones who really benefit from this change, and it should be something that really gives them a step up versus tanks as well. And AD carry mains have had a pretty hard time in the preseason so far, I gotta say, so hopefully this kind of thing will be a nice bit of love to them and give them a fighting chance. Now, the fact that the different champion classes, stuff like tanks or assassins, can play in a variety of different roles is kind of a blessing and a curse for League. It's great for people who want to be flexible with whatever role they're playing, maybe prefer a really specific type of champion, but it also means that when the meta shifts in favor of one particular class, they end up dominating a bunch of roles at the same time. And this has been the case for both junglers and supports ever since the introduction of the new Keystone Mastery, Courage of the Colossus. The shield it gives as a reward for hard crowd controlling an enemy champion is just super powerful, and it's made the tank class pretty darn strong, meaning tanks are the go-to champions for supports right now, junglers and top laners too kind of, which also means a nerf to Courage of the Colossus is gonna bring a new class into the power potentially, and it looks like that's gonna be the case with both the AP junglers and the AP support champions. So a reduction to the power of Courage of the Colossus and an increase of the cooldown is going to mean that it should hopefully be a little bit more viable to play AP supports and AP junglers again, so that can definitely be considered an indirect buff to those champions who benefit because they never took the mastery in the first place. AP junglers are the least likely to maybe make the comeback though, since the Courage of the Colossus nerf could be kind of counteracted actually by a change that's happening to the blue buff. So although the AP junglers get sort of an indirect buff from the Courage of the Colossus nerf, they're also getting an indirect nerf from some blue buff changes. Blue buff originally increased AP by 15%, that's actually being removed in favor of extending the buff duration by 30 seconds. So only time's going to tell if that ends up being good or bad overall for AP junglers, but it's probably going to vary based on the champion actually. Those that aren't super dependent on stacking AP are probably fine, but the more like bursty, sort of damage focused AP junglers are maybe going to be a little bit worse off after the change. Another one of the most frustrating strategies in the game, right now at least, is the level 3 Krug cheese for junglers, where these really strong early game junglers, the guys like Lee Sin, stuff like Nidalee could take red buff, followed by Krugs to get a super fast level 3, before just heading into the bot lane where all of the laners are still level 1, which makes the early gank super insane, super easy as well, and allowed those early game junglers to just snowball like crazy. But the change to the experience given by Krugs is actually going to kill this strategy completely. So taking red buff followed by Krugs after the patch is going to leave you a little bit of experience short of level 3, so you can definitely still use it as your clear route, but you won't be able to pull off that ridiculous level 3 jungler gank before the enemy laners even get time to reach level 2. So this is actually an indirect buff to all of the junglers who originally were just too weak to use this level 3 gank strategy, mainly the champions that kind of want to just farm to level 6, the guys like Warwick, a Mumu maybe, the champions that really have a hard time ganking before they get their ultimates. And as well, it's also going to stop early game junglers, the guys like Lee Sin and Nidalee, just snowballing like crazy from that easy early gank. So that just about covers all of the indirect buffs that are taking place on this patch. Next up, we're looking at some of the predictions that we've got for the new overpowered champions. So the biggest winner from this patch is definitely gonna actually be Garen, really, thanks to the new armor shred bonus that he's getting on his E. Taking away 25% of a target's armor is honestly just massive, since it not only sets up Garen to be just super favored in a trade, but it also makes life a lot easier for his teammates too, since they're gonna essentially gain bonus damage against the targets with his 4 spins of judgment, and it's going to make Garen an awesome counter to other tanky champions now. And since it's not limited to one target, this combo is going to be just amazing with AoE crowd control abilities that allow Garen to tag just a bunch of enemies with the armor reduction. It's going to make him an awesome frontliner for team fights, so maybe we'll even see some crazy wombo combo plays alongside the change, and maybe even a lot more Garen picks up in the top lane, so he's definitely going to be someone to look out for. Varus has also received a pretty nice buff to his passive, increasing the amount of attack speed that he can generate from it, and this is definitely made to improve his attack speed focused builds and put them on par with his AD caster sort of focused builds, with the focus on just like sniping people at like a really long range and just kind of like sieging and stuff. But they're definitely a really big upgrade overall, so it might end up putting attack speed Varus into a pretty OP group for the next patch. Fiddlesticks has also received a couple of nice little changes, more damage on his Drain in the early game and a lower cooldown on his Dark Wind at all stages of the game. Really, it's kind of just an attempt by Riot to give him some love, make him viable as a jungler again, and it does look like it's going to be a pretty interesting change, should be enough to hopefully put him in a decent spot. Now, the last champion that could definitely become pretty overpowered as a result of the patch is one that's maybe a little bit more situational, and it's actually Tristana. And the reason why is because she really just shines so much as a counter pick against Camille. You know, Camille wants to do nothing more than just jump on top of your squishies and execute them, and Tristana just has the ultimate counter. You know, not only can she rocket jump away, but her Buster Shot cancels Camille's ultimate just straight up pretty much every time. So combine that with the increased damage potential on Fervor of Battle, and Tristana might actually just become one of the go-to AD carry champions to pick once you see a Camille on the enemy team during the draft phase. Either way, that's just about going to wrap things up for our video on the patch 6.24 changes. It's the first time in a while that we've done one of these videos. I think the last one was like patch 6.10, so hopefully you guys like it and we can keep doing one for every patch here on out. Definitely let us know in the comment section below if you want more, or maybe just share your own opinions on the patch so far. Either way, looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.